Hello everyone, thank you for joining the replay of the Practice Acquisitions webinar. My name is Peter Jawidzik and I am the managing partner at Stratos Wealth Partners, and I'm happy to be here today talking about our Practice Acquisition seminar series that we've done several times throughout the United States. And it's a great topic. It comes up all the time. It's probably the number one things that financial advisors ask for. So really what we wanted to do is at a high level talk about what the opportunity is that's out there. We want to talk about some deal structure and how it all happens, and share a little bit of anecdotal stuff of what we're engaged in from a practice acquisition standpoint, which is pretty exciting, certainly in these times as well. A little bit about who we are. We are Stratos Wealth Partners, and we have some recent facts about our organization. We are 6 years young, and when we started 6 years ago, we had 0 advisors, 0 assets, and today we're in 66 cities in over 20 states, and we're continuing to grow, and we're just managing over about $6 billion in assets right now as of the end of the year. We've had a lot of great growth. When you look at our advisors, we have 160 financial advisors with 124 admin folks that work for us, as well as almost 50 staff members now. We've actually grown to that amount. So we're here to service advisors and help them grow their practice, and part of that is practice acquisition, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. I put this slide up on the screen for a number of different reasons, because this is the eye-opening thing that advisors run into when it is time for retirement, or retirement on their mind. They think, okay, I've created this nest egg, and just like your clients come to you, they say, all right, I haven't saved a dime for retirement, and here's your opportunity to become a legend. And they expect miracles to happen. Advisors are no different in that, because they invest everything that they own, certainly in their businesses, and it is probably going to be one of the single biggest assets, probably bigger than the home that you're living in, that you'll use to sell for retirement and funding retirement. The good news is there's lots of options out there. When you look at the opportunity today, the average age of advisors are in their lower 50s, about 51. 43% are over the age of 55. So I like to say a nice blended rate here is the average age of a financial advisor is in their mid-50s. And when you look by the year 2017, which isn't too far away, 25,000 independent advisors will be looking to exit the business, and that certainly is an opportunity. And 70% of the advisors with 10 years or less until retirement don't have an adequate succession plan in place. We see this every single day that we talk to advisors. It is astounding, but it's a huge opportunity, and it's something that really you should be thinking about, and as a way to get in front of advisors to look at what some opportunities are. Interestingly enough, advisors over the age of 60 control $2.3 trillion of client assets. That is very interesting in and of itself. Advisors are working longer, and we are going to see that trend. The interesting thing is that we don't see a lot of young people coming into the business, and I would say that the industry is having a challenge right now of how are they going to backfill advisors and doing a lot of creative things. You've heard of the robo-advisor and those types of things, and that's all coming to fruition. We're hearing more and more about that today, but nothing really beats the experience like having a relationship with your financial advisor. So when you look at the philosophy of how do you go after practices, and you look at an agreed upon price and what the terms and conditions are and what's truly appropriate, you know, it's really interesting. Everything always comes down to price, and I always like to use the phrase that price is king in the absence of value. You really have to look at the practice and what it brings to the table, and there's really 3 types of strategies that you will see. There's an industry standard, which we'll go through each one of these. You have an accelerated purchase or a quick exit, and then you have an annuitized or an extended deal, depending on how the advisor is looking to engage with that practice over time. So we're going to cover each of these, and we have the metrics underneath of each one of these. But when you're looking for practice, there's nothing better than the power of networking. That's how we uncover deals. Today we're engaged in about, I would say, 15 to 18 deals actively. Currently at Stratos, there is not an advisor in our organization that has the desire and the resources to engage in an acquisition that isn't already in one, and a lot of that has to do with the networking. We have the privilege of meeting and seeing advisors every single day, and this is how we are finding our opportunities. We are not advertising that we are looking for them. We are not going out and using services to find practices that are for sale. It's about meeting with advisors and understanding what their succession plan is, and that's when we uncover some opportunities. So we talked about the industry standard as one of the philosophies or one of the ways to structure a deal, and we put a hypothetical practice in place that we said if it was a $400,000 in GDC, 200,000 of that is recurring, 200,000 is non-recurring. We would say that the recurring value of this practice is about 500,000. The non-recurring is about 200,000. So recurring we usually do 2.5 times revenue, non-recurring is 1 times revenue, so that's how we arrive at a purchase price of $700,000. This is typically standard of what you'll see out there. So when you look at terms, you might see 20 to 30% down, the balance is paid over 3 to 5 years, and then some conditions would be that the selling advisor is usually available and engaged in a transition of 18 to 36 months. That is critical to ensure a soft handoff. And we are facilitating a lot of those right now where the advisors are engaged and they're helping transition and they're working side by side along with the buying advisor to make sure that everything is going smoothly and that the clients are bought in. Now when you look at an accelerated practice, we're going to look at the same thing, so same details here and what the value is. But when we have an accelerated value, that's when we would say that it's 1 times gross projected revenue. So the value of this practice, because it's accelerated, would come out at 400,000. So what are our terms and our options? Could be 10 to 20% down, variabilized payments. This will generate more to the seller if they share in the risk. The option 2 would be 50 down and with payments over 2 to 3 years. Could also be an all-cash deal. We see this with smaller practices, advisors that are going in and picking up a practice that might be 100 to 150,000. So when you look at the conditions of what this might look like, you might have a seller that must have an absolutely abrupt exit. Could be material health conditions. We've seen deals like that before. Risk of client attrition with the seller exiting quickly, and that's why the value is taken down so much there, because if you have an immediate exit, it's not clear if the clients will stay or they'll move because we do not have that advisor on for 18 to 36 months to ensure a transition, a smooth transition. Also, the selling advisor wants all the cash up front, and that's typical, and that will also devalue the price of the purchase. So there's a little more risk up there. There's the opportunity of certainly picking up the practice at a discounted price, but depending on the due diligence that you're doing on the practice and what's going on, and when you're taking a look under the hood, that might make some sense to get involved in a deal like this. When you look at an annuitized value, this is a little bit different here, and this is going to be a longer stay, and typically the practice is going to be valued at a little bit more. So your recurring value might be 3.5 times revenue, non-recurring 1.5 times. And then what we would see is the terms would be 10% down and the balance over 8 to 10 years. This is becoming more popular today when we're doing some of these deals. I mean, you have the standard, but then you have a deal like this. This is typically something that might be put together for a team inside of a practice that is looking to purchase an existing practice. So they were long-term employees and they put a buying group together and they're buying the actual practice. So the seller believes in the buyer's ability absolutely. So that's the risk there. And that doesn't need much upfront money to do a deal like this, and is willing to receive those payments over an extended period of time. There are lots of tax considerations to think about when you're doing something like this, and as always, we would tell you to certainly consult your tax advisor when you're going through and you're looking at deals like this. The purchase price must be allocated among 7 asset categories. There are 2 major ones that we're looking at. You have capital gains and certainly ordinary income, and those would be the client account and revenue, the name, and goodwill. That would be under capital gains. You have your consulting agreements or your earnout, which would be ordinary income. Capital gains obviously are taxed at a lower than ordinary income rate, and then the buyer can write off right away if ordinary income otherwise is deductible over 15 years of capital gains. So that's another benefit there. If the sale is all capital gains, the buyer will can only write off 1/15 of the sale price while being taxed on all the revenue. So that's another consideration. Then the key, one other factor is the key: how long will the buyer remain in the business when they want the tax deduction? So that's just another thing to figure out there. So there's lots of risks, obviously, both to the seller and the purchaser. I've put those up here on the screen. Certainly the seller in certain deals could take a lower down payment, could have buyer insolvency. Client attrition is a big factor, extended terms of payments, and then philosophy of alignment. That's another thing to think about. Are there conflicts there in 2 different ways of doing business? From a purchaser standpoint, it's going to be the opposite. You might have higher down payments. You might have a disengaged seller, also client attrition, embedded compliance risk. This is very important. You always want to take a look under the hood of the practice and do your due diligence. Staffing attrition. I've always said you're only as good as the people that support you, and if your staff are not looking to hang around through the transition, that could send a clear and negative message to the existing client base. So you really want to look at that. And then you also have cash flow challenges as well. So look at next steps, right? Is your business ready for an acquisition, whether you're the buyer or the seller? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the staff? Do you understand the process and what it's going to take to move through that? These deals, as you're structuring them, could take anywhere from a year to 36 months to plan everything out and get everything mapped out to have a very good plan in place for the acquisition. It is critical. Also, how do you identify some opportunities? Well, there's a number of things. I would say leverage your wholesalers. You should be talking to your wholesalers and get the message out there that you are acquiring. We've seen people that do email campaigns out to targeted advisors, or you're working with other professionals like CPAs, attorneys, property and casualty firms. But nothing is going to be as effective as the networking that you're engaging in all of these, getting out there and meeting the advisors. That's something that you just need to really think about and get engaged. Get engaged from that standpoint. And then how do you win the deal? That is very important. I think it's an emotional thing, right? You're going to win the deal when the advisor listens and understands the seller's motivations, that works for a deal that suits both parties. Most deals that we've stepped in on the 11th hour on is because the buyer and the seller did not understand each other's motivations and they weren't on the same page. So getting in there to mediate what the focus would be there certainly made a big difference. Also, red flags. I wanted to cover that real quick. Advisors need to staff their business to create systems that are not based on where they are, but where they hope to be. We've been a big believer in this. We always hire ahead of the curve. If you're not willing to take the risk and you're not confident that you can ramp up the revenues after the acquisition to cover the excess overhead, they may not be ready to acquire. It's as simple as that. When we started our firm back in 2009, that was absolutely something that was critical for us to make sure that we built into our business plan that we always hire ahead of the curve and that we had the staffing there to meet the needs. What I'd like to offer up is I'm going to put my contact information certainly on the screen, as well as Bryant Sikorsky's contact information. We are in the Carolinas, supporting the Carolinas, and you can reach me at my information here. My telephone number is here on the screen. Feel free to call me or email me with any specific questions that you have. You can do the same thing with Bryant Sikorsky. He's in the Raleigh area, and that makes sense.